Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, our Lean Overview. My name is Greg Farabee with Kent State University's Center for Corporate and Professional Development, and we certainly appreciate you taking the time to join us today. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items so that we are all on the same page in terms of how you participate in today's event. All the participants are currently muted, so we would encourage you to use the question tab on your pane to the right side of your screen. On that panel, you can submit your questions, and we will be able to collect those and address them as time permits throughout, as well as at the end of the presentation. You'll also notice in that panel on the right side that there is a handout section. We have loaded a handout for today's presentation that you are able to download. So at your leisure, please feel free to download that PDF. And finally, just because I know that question will come up somewhere along the line, we will go ahead and provide you with a recording of this webinar upon completion. So we, again, appreciate you joining us. I'd like to take a quick second to introduce Kent State facilitator Tom Putnam. Tom is going to be your subject matter expert today and lead us through our webinar. So again, thank you everyone for joining us. I'm going to now turn the presentation over to Tom and appreciate your questions as they come in. I will again monitor those and do my best to keep them in front of us and allow Tom to respond as necessary. So Tom, thank you.
All right. Thanks, Greg. Thanks for joining us today. And we'll get the presentation up here. So hopefully all can see the screen. And again, this topic is a lean overview. It's not intended to make you experts, but hopefully we'll be covering the important pieces of lean and the thinking of lean as we go through. As Greg said, he's the host, and that's me as the presenter. Before the agenda, we want to cover some of the operational definitions of lean, a little bit about where lean came from, some of the keys to success for lean, and from there we will talk about what does that mean, what are the principles, and this thing that we talk about as the ideal state or the true north condition. And in order to understand what that means, we want to cover what value and waste mean to us in terms of lean thinking, and applying the 4 lean rules, also known as the Toyota production system, allows us to deliver or get closer to that ideal state. And we have some tools that probably some of you are familiar with, such as 5S, Visual Workplace. Those are things that are actually used as countermeasures to reduce or eliminate waste, overburden, or variation. So they actually come in a little bit later in the thinking of lean, and that's why we want to talk about the other topics first. The last part is this idea of lean thinking, also known as A3 thinking, and the scientific method, and how lean promotes scientific thinking in solving problems and doing continuous improvement. A lot of that's based on W. Edwards Deming process improvement framework, which we'll talk about briefly towards the end. So the first thing here, what is lean? You can think about the word lean. If you look it up in the dictionary, I would think things that would come to mind would be fit, not a lot of excess, there's not fat. And I think that's why we've used that word for lean manufacturing or lean office. It's a systematic approach, and it's pursuing perfection. It's a way to do continuous improvement. And what we're doing is focusing on eliminating waste and flowing that product or service to the customer at their request or pull. So that first definition, I'm sure you pulled up other definitions as well. The second one that I've listed there is actually from Wikipedia, and this one goes a little bit further in not just mentioning the term waste, but the other two terms that are typically used when we talk about lean goals, and that's overburden and variation or unevenness. And you can see there's the Japanese words for those as well. But the key point here is in there, it's a systematic approach. It's continuous improvement. It's a way of doing business. Now, somebody would say, well, why would you want to do that? Why would you want to do lean? Well, it's a simple thing, really. If you read what the goals of it are and what the deliverables are, I think you can get a sense for saying, wow, that makes good sense, makes good business sense. And it certainly does, because it's about the money. It's about the dollars. It is attractive. Companies here in the United States particularly have really tried to assimilate these concepts of lean, because the companies that have done that well have been more competitive, have been more successful. And they're successful on this business front, the dollar front, because lean does things like reduces your inventory. It frees up cash. It reduces the time between the order from the customer to the time you get the payment from the customer. So your cash flow improves. Your cost structure is improved because you use your time more efficiently. You don't make as many defects. You don't have rework. You use your equipment well. So your assets, the investment that the company makes to produce the goods or provide the services are better utilized. So the company spends less money to deliver what's of value to the customer. And doing it in a very timely fashion, again, allows for better customer service. So all these things, it sounds like mom and apple pie. They're definitely achievable if lean is done with the right mindset. And now that we've kind of seen what lean is and why we'd want to do it, the next question is, well, how do we start going about doing that? And this, the keys to lean success, there's been a lot of things written on this topic. Initially, the Japanese companies that in the modern world were the first to be recognized as doing this well. And American companies trying to emulate it struggled with it. I think a lot of that was because people were focusing more on the tools, and they weren't really focusing first on this set of values and principles and the thinking first. So really the key here is to really understand what it is that lean is trying to promote. What are the overall goals, the ideal state, the true north condition that we want to get to? And what we're going to agree on is a discipline to do that. A discipline that says we're going to make the problems visible. We're not going to hide things. We're going to call it like it is. And when we have problems, we're going to meet them head on and fix them. And culturally, that can be difficult in some companies because that requires trust. And trust doesn't happen right away either. So lean is definitely not a destination. It's a journey. It takes time. It's a cultural change. And it's really building a business in a way that your traditional problems don't really exist. They can exist because of the way you do business. And I know that sounds extreme, but it really can be that way. And it has to start, again, at least in my opinion, and I think a lot of literature would support this, that leadership has to help with that. Leadership has to have a commitment to deploying lean, and that means that they understand it, that they can emulate it, that they can ask the right kinds of questions, that their behaviors support it, that the feedback they give to the people that are doing the work is consistent in supporting that. And it would include things like urgency with it. Because if you make problems visible, and if you're operating in the right way, and you're trying to service the customer immediately, there's urgency there. At the same time, you have to have enough patience and discipline to address the problems in an efficient and effective way so that you truly fix the problems and not just symptoms of the problems. All of that also requires leadership to have a strategy and a vision for how they're going to go about, start the lean journey and continue on the lean journey. Lean is not, hopefully people don't do it as a program. In my experience, in my business past, when you started talking about a program, that was flavor of the month, resistance, lots of things that people say, well, that's going to pass. I'm going to keep doing what I do, and this too shall pass. As I said, lean is not about the tools. There's lots of good tools in lean that are countermeasures, or used as countermeasures or solutions to solve problems that you might see. But if those things are done in isolation and we don't have the context of the overall system and how it fits into the long-term journey to become more ideal or get to the ideal state, we're going to start not doing things for the right reasons. So we'll start addressing symptoms rather than the true underlying purpose for things. Again, it's not easy. It's not new. There's a history, modern history for lean that starts back Industrial Revolution stuff. Eli Whitney, back around 1850. You may recall that he's known for the invention of the cotton gin and creating interchangeable parts for that machine. That machine was also something that was made to do work that was previously done by people. And so that's another concept that lean works on, is recognizing that some things machines are good for, other things people are good for. Let's separate the man from machine work and use it appropriately. As we move closer to current times, we have people like Frederick Taylor. He was big on the scientific method and kind of industrial engineering, studying the process, understanding the work content. The Gilbreths were more along those lines as well. As we move forward in time, we see Henry Ford, Charles Sorensen in the Ford world there. Henry Ford introduced this idea of an assembly line, moving one part at a time through the process. And that was so effective that, later on GM started to do the same thing through Alfred Sloan. But a lot of the stuff around lean that people refer to today really stemmed out of after World War II with the gurus down on the lower left here, Edwards Deming, which I've referenced before, Ishikawa, Juran, and Crosby. Those of you that have done any reading in the quality world might recognize some of those names. And you might say, what are they doing on a history of lean? And I think this is interesting because people can have lost sight of this in some cases. Lean really started with this recognition of meeting the customer requirements and their needs and making sure that the products and the services provided were of good quality, and that variation can create problems for that. And those gentlemen down there were big proponents of those kinds of topics. And the Japanese particularly leveraged Deming in his teachings because he was in Japan, sent there by the U.S. Army after World War II to help Japan kind of recover from the difficulties of war. Some of the people from Japan that listened to Deming's teachings and recognized their value and took those ideas and extended them and added their own was Taiichi Ohno and Shigeo Shingo. And those are the two gentlemen that are really referred to quite often. And they work for Toyota, and we'll talk about the 4 lean rules, which are really this idea of the Toyota production system, or TPS. James Womack is recognized here in the U.S. because he worked with the Japanese and was able to translate some of the words and the terminology and their thinking and explain it into, Western words that people were able to understand. So he helped a lot with bringing lean concepts to American business again. And what are those concepts? Well, as I said, it starts with this idea of the ideal state or the true north condition. And it's these 3 components. We want to deliver the right part or service at the right time, in the right amount, when the customer asks for it. Internally, we want our operations or our services to be free of any waste, not have overburden or stress, and minimal or no variation or unevenness in the product or service that's provided. In order to do that, when we have problems, we need to recognize them, make them visible, and then use good scientific techniques, scientific method to identify root causes and deliver solutions that eliminate those from recurrence. And the big thing to do that is people, because people have the knowledge, and engaging everyone gives you the best opportunity to capture all of the knowledge that all of the people in your organization have. People are the most important asset. They should be valued, recognized, and developed. And they have the knowledge of the processes because they're the closest to that work. So, and a different way to state what ideal state is, or true north condition, would be providing one piece at a time or service at a time, immediately, right away when the customer asks for it, at no cost, in a safe work environment. And obviously we can look and say, well, that's not possible. We can't do that. It's not fully achievable. But if we keep that as our compass, as our ideal condition, and we recognize that we can always get better, we're on that lean journey, and we can continue to try and identify those things that are preventing us from getting to this condition. We always have opportunity to get better. We could be the best in the business, but no one is standing still, and we can always be better. So part of this, again, is delivering to the customer. What is it that the customer wants? Well, the customer wants what they're paying for. They want to get their money's worth. They want something of value. And so this idea of value is, what is the customer willing to pay for? What is that product or service that your business is providing to them that they want? And anything that doesn't provide that to them, in the customer's view, is non-value added. It's wasteful. It doesn't help them. And the customer can be internal or external. So external customers, I think this is an easy concept to recognize that, okay, there's going to be some monetary exchange. They're going to give you money for something that you provide to them. Internally, that may be a little less clear. One department to another, there may not be cash exchanged, but it's this idea of, as a company, there's value exchange there. So the issue with this is those things that are not of value. those things take time. They're waste. They only add to cost. And things like how long you inventory product, how much inventory is sitting on your shelf. The customer doesn't care about that. What the customer cares about is when they order the product from you, that they get it in the time frame that they require it. If there's a competitor that doesn't need to carry inventory, but they can provide the same service, they have less cash tied up. And obviously that would be a better condition for them. The customer is not paying for defects. The customer is not paying for the number of times you inspect or rework material. What they're paying for is a finished product or service that meets their needs. And meeting the needs is one of those things that's kind of a definition of quality. And I think that's an important thing to remember. The focus is on the customer. You're trying to provide a quality service or product, and the definition of quality is reliably meeting customer requirements. I'd separate that, don't want to get in a long discussion on this topic, but from performance. So what you want to be able to do is to deliver what the customer expects from you consistently, reliably. The performance level is a different topic. If the customer is buying something that they expect that's going to have a life of a week or a month, and it lasts that long consistently, that meets the customer needs. If your product lasts a year, that's nice. That may be exceeding their expectations. But if one product lasts a year and the next product you give them lasts a day, that can't be very satisfying to them either. So there's a difference between the performance level and the quality. And again, quality is reliably meeting the requirements. So what holds us back from delivering value to the customer, delivering the quality to the customer, servicing the customer immediately? It's all this stuff that's non-value added. It's the wasteful things. And the lean mantra is eliminate waste, overburden, variation. What is waste? It's any activity that doesn't add value, non-value added work. Overburden is really a different form of waste, but it's this idea of strain. It's excessive strain. It takes more effort to do it than is really necessary. And you can see this in people, that things like carpal tunnel or ergonomic issues, back strain, people taking time off work, even if it's just stress-related stuff, those are all overburden type of excessive strain. It can be with equipment, where you've got equipment that is being overused and is breaking down. Or maybe you're using the wrong equipment completely. And the third one is variation, or unevenness, as they call it. And variation adds noise. It creates an uncertainty in the outcomes. And when you have that difference in outcome or uncertainty, it requires that people make adjustments. And those adjustments take time. And that's time we can never get back. And those things all add to non-value added time, non-value added activities. So waste, overburden, and variation, those are the three. And variation, again, a quality quote, variation is the enemy of quality. When you've got variation, you've got noise, you've got inconsistency, reliably meeting customer requirements becomes more challenging. So now that we know what those things are, the question is how do we go about this? How do we get on this lean journey that we're right part, right time, right quantity, solving problems immediately, eliminating waste, overburden, variation, keeping people as our center point? Well, we start with this idea of the lean, first part of lean thinking. which is, where are we today? What is our current state or current condition? Let's observe that, and let's just write it down, as it is, as the facts present themselves. And there's kind of a standard set of metrics that we can look at. How long does this take to do? How reliable is the equipment? When we do a changeover from one product or service to another, how long does that take? Those are all kind of standard metrics, and that's nice because Lean almost gives us a checklist for that to start to characterize our current process or current state. We always have a reference. We always have the ideal state to look at as perfection, that true north condition. We know we will never reach it, but we're on a journey to get closer to it. And once we know where we're currently at and we know what the ideal state is, we can start to formulate a plan of a future state or a future condition that would get us closer to the ideal state, that would remove some of the waste or the overburden or the variation from our processes and allow us to better serve customers. And I use the word here, projects. Some people would use the word Kaizen. That's the Japanese word for small change for the better. Maybe they'd say we're going to do events. But the idea here is structured, focused, deliverable type of action plans using scientific method to get from point A to point B, to get from the current state to the future state condition. On that path, obviously wastes are an important part of that. Eliminating waste is one of those mantras that you have no doubt heard if you've read anything about Lean. There are other mnemonics for Lean than the one I'm shown here, but I kind of like this one. It's easy to remember for me. Tim T. Wood, and the letters in that name are the first letters for the words that are describing the 8 different forms of waste. And the first is transportation. And that is any movement of material, and the rest of this says doesn't support synchronous flow. What we mean by that is you're going to have to move parts through your process or services through. Ideally, you would move one at a time when the customer wants it. Anything else is could be considered more than ideal, and that would be a waste. So moving product around your facilities has some form of transportation waste. It may be necessary in your current condition, but would be something you'd want to recognize. Inventory. Again, making one piece at a time is the minimal amount. Any supply in excess of that, we should look at as an opportunity. Motion. It's usually associated with people movement, but it can be equipment as well. It's the amount, it's the actual activity or the movement that's going on to do the work that's being performed. There's always, if there's more than one way something's being done, then one of those is better than another. Okay. Talent. Obviously, we said to engage people. People are our most underutilized asset. We want to make sure that people are trained, they're in a safe environment, they have the most knowledge of the process. We should engage them in that work, ask them to help to solve the problems. That's not management's job by itself, and we shouldn't think that as management, that management is smarter and is the only people that can make decisions. That would be not recognize the value of the people that you're working with. So just as a reminder here, if you do have questions, go ahead and post them. We're monitoring that, and if we have questions, we may come in and answer those at that time or answer them at the end. Waiting is a big one. It's that idle time when either equipment is sitting idle or people are waiting, and that happens quite often in processes that aren't balanced well, or in batch manufacturing type processes, or in places where things aren't synchronized well. And again, doing lean activities here, putting in the right kinds of countermeasures can help to reduce waiting and other forms of waste. The last three, overproduction. That is producing more than is needed. And the question is needed when. So it's producing before the customer needs it, or producing in a larger quantity than they need at the current time. Overprocessing is different. Overprocessing is doing more. It could be considered closely related to motion, where you're doing more effort than you need to deliver that value to the customer. So an easy example of that to me is if you have to, let's say, heat treat or anneal some metal parts to remove stresses, and that annealing process should be 4 hours long, and you leave those parts in the furnace for 6 hours, then you've overprocessed those parts. They're still good, but you didn't need those extra 2 hours, and that's time you're never going to get back. It's non-value added time. It did not provide any value to the customer. The last form of waste, which is one we probably see often, it's a little easier to recognize, is this idea of defects. It's scrap or rework of a product or service in order to get it to meet the customer requirements. So those are the 8 forms of waste. Some textbooks reference 7 forms of waste. The one that was not referenced initially was number 4, which is the talent or the people themselves. And in original lean thinking, it was almost taken for granted, and they actually realized that some people were overlooking that. So we put it in as a conscious 8th form of waste.
Tom, we have a question as it relates to the forms of waste and specifically defect. Could you speak to how that applies in a non-manufacturing environment, in an office environment per se?
Yeah, so it would depend upon the type of product or service being provided. Defects could be, again, not reliably meeting the customer requirements, their expectation of a service, how quickly that service is provided, what is the experience of the customer through that delivering of that service. Did they feel that it was done in a respectful manner even? Was it as timely as it should have been? Did they have to repeat themselves? I mean, those are the kinds of things that you could look at that would be considered rework or defects in the non-manufacturing environment. Some things might be paperwork, right? If the paperwork isn't correct, if it's not completely filled out, or if there's an error in it. Hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah, I think that got to the point of the person's question, so thank you.
So one of the things I'll ask of the audience here, there is one of these forms of waste that is considered the worst. And there's a reason why. So when we're done here, I'll answer that, but I'll ask to see if anybody on the line can identify the correct one out of this set. So now we know what true north is. We know what we're talking about in lean, reducing variation, reducing waste, reducing overburden. And we understand value in waste in this true north condition. How do we go about getting there, getting closer to it? And these 4 lean rules look really simple, but those are really this fundamental level of aspects that are required, and these are really called the Toyota production system in some textbooks, but it's these basic conditions that should be in place. You should have flow. What we mean by that is the product or service should flow, if you want to call it like a river, to the customer at their request. There's different ways to flow. The most ideal condition is one piece at a time on demand. The next best would be first in, first out in some size of a batch. The third best is supermarket style. And we ought to be familiar with supermarkets. We go to supermarkets. We have products on shelves that it's inventory that you can go on and pull what you need. And at some point that provides a signal to replenish inventory. That provides a connection. And that's the second rule, connection. We want our processes, our equipment, our people to be connected, the information to be connected, so that we know when to do something and when not to do something. We're synchronized. We have less waiting time. We're a smooth operating machine. We're a team that knows exactly where we're going, who needs to do what. They do it at the right time. Everything works well. We need to have those connections in our processes, which are binary and clear. And the Japanese word that's used quite often is this Kanban. And that's the connection. Kanban is the signal to produce or not produce. We need to have that clear. The third one, which is a huge help for training and quality, is standard work. Again, it sounds easy, but standard work is the content, sequence, and timing of work. And the predictable outcome of that work is also specified. The amount and location of inventory is included in that standard work. So it's not just, here's the steps you should do. There's a lot more to it. But again, what it does is it provides good training for people. It provides consistency. And it's not easy to do because a lot of people will say, well, my way is better. Well, Lean would say, how do you know that? How can we show that? What does better mean? How can we measure better? Maybe your way is better, but we need to show that. Because if your way is the right way, wouldn't we want everybody doing it that way? And whatever is being done today may be the best that we know how today, but that doesn't mean it can't be better. Right? We're going for perfection here. We're going for the ideal state. We can always get better. So standard work is not static either. And it happens, it should be evolving and getting better through continuous improvement, step 4 here. And we're using the scientific method to do that. When we have problems, and companies that are really lean thinking embrace problems, they see problems as opportunities that challenge the status quo, that provide opportunities to identify better ways of doing things. And that's done through what we call a help chain. So again, we're valuing people. You don't work alone. You work better as a team. Many hands make light work. More ideas are better. Okay. The idea of a help chain provides an interesting diagram here. I think most people, if you would look at this diagram closely, you might do a double take on it and say, boy, that doesn't look right. And well, it doesn't look like an organizational chart. It's actually flipped over. The higher level management person, the group leader in this diagram, is actually at the bottom with the team leaders above them, and then the operators actually at the top. And that is done intentionally that way because in Lean, The people that are providing the value to the customer are those operators. They are in the value stream. They are providing that service or product. The team leaders and group leaders are there to support that work, enable that work, and help them to do that well.
Tom, another question has come in, and it fits here well in terms of talking about the different people and their role in the lean process. This person works in human resources and wonders, how do you work with clients to alleviate the fears that naturally come with the concept of lean as a misconception of we need to do more with less, and how that affects people's morale and their role in the process of making change within the organization?
Well, that's a good question. I think I would start with the idea of, really lean is customer focused. It's trying to get at what is it that the customers value and how can we deliver that to them better. I know, change is hard and it can definitely feel like people in an organization, there's got to be some trust there, or you have to build the trust. And again, you have to do that through engaging the people in this process in a way that shows them that you value them, and that what you're really focused on is not fixing symptoms or, eliminating people. It's eliminating the problems. It's creating the conditions that'll should make their job easier, more enjoyable, let them be more engaged in the work. And if they're servicing customers better and you're doing those things, then their job is actually more secure and they have a better competitive condition, which kind of brings us to this next slide here. It's a graphic, it's a visual. Japanese are really good at this stuff. This is the house of Toyota, as people would call it. And basically, it's got a roof on it, which is the things I kind of described. It's that better business out there that's got a lower cost position, that services the customer well, that has good quality in their products. That's the roof that can provide a safe living space for the workers and shareholders. The foundation of that is this idea of stability. I mentioned variation a couple times before. That stability, reliability stuff at the bottom is what Deming started with the Japanese in the late 1940s. And they recognized the value of that. And then they build off of that with the other things that you see there. The two pillars, the left side is the just-in-time, making sure that you're focused on delivering to the customer when they need it. The right side is this idea of separating man from machine and solving problems with the scientific method. So, the tools that are used as you're going on this journey and you're trying to implement the lean rules of flow, connection, standard work, and improvement at the source, these tools can help to attack the symptoms that you see, the inventory problems, the defects, all the Tim T. Wood stuff. Okay, and a lot of companies will start with the visual controls, making problems visible, 5S, organizing the workplace well. And I'm not going to read through all these. These are the main tools that are out there, but they are really kind of standard work or methods that are used to attack specific problems that you would see in a manufacturing or service environment. And on the handouts that you have, there's the second page of it is actually a table that tries to identify the different tools that you would use based on the form of waste that you observe. And all this is being attacked through this process of lean. We call it A3 thinking. The reason why they use A3 is actually A3 is a paper size. It's about an 11 by 17. And the idea here is that you should be able to communicate your thinking that concisely to be able to summarize it on one sheet of paper of that size. But you're doing it based on facts. You're making decisions based on data, not on intuition. You understand what the customer wants. You understand how your system, how your processes work, how they're connected, and you're looking with scientific method to look at the root causes of the problems and address them with fundamental changes. And I use the analogy, scorekeepers don't score. That last statement there. Processes vary because of the inputs. They vary because of the way the process is designed. If you're in management and you've got people that make a mistake and that creates a problem, a defect for the customer, the old school thinking would be to blame the person or discipline the person involved in it. What we should be asking in lean thinking is, why do we have a process that's designed that allows that person to make that mistake? Because that's management's problem. We need to fix that. There's a template for this. Again, it's a scientific method. What does that mean? Well, scientific method says I form a hypothesis, I design an experiment, I do the experiment, I check the results, see what I've learned, and based on that, then I take action to leverage that. Deming called that Plan, Do, Check, Act, PDCA. The Six Sigma guys have I think, improved upon that, evolved that a little bit with the define, measure, analyze, improve, and control, or DMAIC process. It's just got more structure to it and more tools to use. But in essence, these steps that you see on here are basically asking you to start with your current condition, look at what the ideal state is, and then start to design a future state that will get you closer to the ideal, and work the process of taking actions that address root causes, using some of the tools that we mentioned briefly before. So I did want to at least mention that a lot of this that I talked about, the scientific method, this A3 thinking, it does stem from work that Deming was involved in and promoted there in Japan and here in the U.S. starting in the 1940s. And it's these four aspects. You can read a lot about that in other texts, including Deming's 14 points, books like Out of the Crisis that he wrote. A lot of good thinking from him. But it's these four things. Systems thinking, that everything is part of a system, processes are interconnected. We can break those processes down in the finer parts, but we need to understand how they connect together to really get the best out of changes that we might make. Variation, as I said, is the enemy of quality. We need to understand that. The theory of knowledge is around how people learn, and the best way you learn is by doing. And so a lot of this stuff is, go and see, go and do. We will help you. We'll teach you to fish. We're not going to fish for you. And people that are involved in that actually feel better too. They feel more empowered and committed to the results. The last thing is this idea of psychology, which again supports that people inherently want to feel engaged. They want to do good. They want to feel that they're useful and that they matter. And it's not about carrying a big stick and forcing people to do things. If you provide the right work environment, people want to engage and do things. So with that, I just want to reinforce this is what we've talked about during this webinar. And there are a lot of details here that I haven't provided, but the basic essence is there, and the two-page handout, I think, helps to reinforce what I've discussed here. So we can open for more questions if there are any.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, we'd welcome any other questions. If anyone would like to submit a question, now would be a good time. Certainly want to thank Tom for joining us today and sharing his insight and providing us with this lean overview webinar. And again, certainly, want to thank all of you for joining us, giving us part of your day. Hopefully you walked away with some concrete tips and ideas here that have piqued your interest, and perhaps you can take into your organizations and start to take your own lean journey. So not looking like I've got any other questions coming in at the moment, so do want to go ahead and once again thank everybody, and we will, as I noted earlier, you will be receiving an email with information on how to download this if you'd like to share it with your colleagues. We also have an opportunity for our programs with our Lean Practitioner series coming up, so you can certainly contact us here at the Center for Corporate and Professional Development if you'd like to learn more about the Lean tools and get more in depth. And as you leave the webinar, you will be prompted to complete a survey. We would encourage you to do that so that we can collect your thoughts. We, as I guess we should, especially with this topic, could strive to continuously improve, and would love to have your feedback so that we can make the following webinars that much better. So again, thank you everyone, and we look forward to hearing from you.